Hey, so in my last video, I talked a little bit about some of the things that I think are contributing to the societal issues and ultimately how they connect with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and specifically that love and belonging section. And I talked specifically about individuals who are struggling or having traumas in this section of love and belonging connection, and what the issue is and what gaps happen in order for healing to occur. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the healing itself. So in order for that healing to happen, the first thing that needs to occur is for the problem to be recognized and acknowledged in the first place. A lot of the times it's not acknowledged or referenced by anyone outside of the individual themselves, because they're not the ones experiencing the issue, the individual is. And if those gaps and those barriers are impacting that individual to not have community in understanding that issue, then really it being the healing lies on the individual to start that process. I will also say that I think that typically healing on a collective level or on a community level bodes itself better to more positive results in the future. And by that I mean that if we were able to have a collective healing or a community healing in this kind of regard, then eventually the kind of systems or the understanding that we would have in place of this issue would be largely more positive for the future impacts of how to prevent these things from happening, because we would have a more collective understanding and then therefore be able to input processes and systems and resources that were beneficial on a larger scale. When healing only takes place on a micro level, on just an individual level, then really that means that healing, unfortunately, is going to be on a micro level. That individual is only going to heal how they are able to heal, and do what works for them, which is great, because healing is healing and it's a ripple in the pool, and it will also bode itself well, but it won't have as large of an impact. That stone won't be as heavy, the ripples will be smaller. The second thing that I want to note is that healing has been taking place forever. For literally as long as we have been alive, we have had to heal and make peace with things that we do and do not understand, and it's just part of life. To me, it kind of comes into play when we talk about we can't have the light without the dark, we can't have peace without chaos, we can't have suffering without healing, that they are a duality, that together they are always present. There is always the flip side of that coin, and you can choose to not acknowledge one side of the coin all you want, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. So if suffering is in place, right, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, healing also eventually must take place, or eventually must become part of that conversation, and it's just really important to talk about. Lastly, and more importantly, I want to talk about ways that we can heal. So the first thing that I think about when I talk about this topic is that there is many avenues of healing, that every culture has their own way, every culture has various ways, to be honest, and that no way is correct, that there is many ways to the same ending. There's a term called equifinality that means that there are many ways to the same ending. And so regardless of how you choose to heal, that method is subjective to you. It is most meaningful to you. It doesn't matter how it happens, as long as you are able to do that work and you are able to heal. Because once you've been able to heal, that pattern or that trauma or that impact that has been a part of you is no longer ruling how you're interacting with individuals and or functioning within your life. It is instead a part of your experience that has added value and perspective to the way that you choose to live your life from that point on. Okay, let's get into the grit. So, specifically with this kind of issue, with this kind of trauma, I really believe that the answer is healing that is expressive and creative. And that is something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about in Western culture. I think a lot of times it's kind of looked at a little side-eyed, and that is really why I started this page, because I believe that, like I said, healing can take course in many ways, and a lot of times before we became accustomed to talk therapy and going to a psychiatrist and all of these things, we really did heal in ways that were more expressive or creative in nature, because that is, in my opinion, an innate instinct for individuals, for humans, to be able to express. And if somebody is not acknowledging your expression, then you choose to then express in a different means, right? And so if we're not able to then communicate verbally to express the suffering or the trauma that we've been experiencing, then the next thing to do is to express in a way that verbal means are not necessary. Things that are innate to creativity. So for example, we're starting to see this shift with individuals who are not able to verbalize things such as PTSD and autism or intellectual disabilities, where art therapy is starting to be used. And that was actually a background that I pursued and wanted to do for a long time. And I think that that has really led me to have this perspective on how healing art can be. Not only in education, but for me personally, that was how I chose to be able to understand myself and move through this emotional space. Is if I didn't have the ability to emotionally connect in the way that I needed to at a young age, instead I could utilize music for me to understand how I felt. So that was a lot of Avril Lavigne and Simple Plan being screamed at the top of my lungs, but it gave me a sense of that emotional connection that I'm talking about, of being seen, of being heard, of being felt, and most importantly, a release. So the other thing that we know about trauma is that it lives in our body. So even if we maybe talk about something, we're not always able to physically release the portion that has been stuck within our body. And that's a whole conversation for another day. But my point, though, is that if we are able to physically express in a way that has allowed us to sit with that feeling, first by acknowledging it, and then by being able to understand its presence, and then being able to express it in a way that it is now coming out of our body and onto or into something, into a song lyric, into the voice tone that I'm singing with, onto the paper, into a dance interpretation, whatever it might be, that has now created a movement and a place for that emotion to physically be expelled, or allowing us to process it, allowing us to be able to free it from our body. Additionally, I think it's important to recognize that if healing has taken place for centuries, it was cultural dancing, it was singing, it was poetry, it was theater, it was all of these other opportunities to get out an idea or a feeling or some kind of expression that needed to take place. So the final leg of my soapbox is that talk therapy and psychiatry are not the only ways to heal. They are the ways that we have made societally understood at this point in time, and that's okay. And that is a way to heal. That's an avenue of healing, and there's nothing wrong if that's what works for you. But if it's not what works for you, that there are many other avenues of healing to utilize that, in my opinion, may or may not have better benefits and don't have some of the issues that I see in some of those traditional avenues that we see right now. So if you have a feeling, if you need to do some healing, if you are feeling alone and siloed in an experience, I urge you to create something that makes you feel understood in that way and see what happens.